Good evening, everyone. I'd like to reconvene the open session of the Coventry School Committee. I have, I believe, 7:01. Could we all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And if we could remain standing for a moment of silence as we consider the work before us this evening. You may be seated. And Mr. Levis, if you could do the safety notification for the public, please.
In case of an emergency, there are two exits to the rear of the building. You can go out either exit and exit the building to your left or to your right.
And Mr. Murray, if you could read the mission statement for Coventry Public Schools, that would be much appreciated.
The Coventry Public Schools, with community partnerships, educate, inspire, and motivate students to be lifelong learners.
Thank you. And just to inform the public, the school committee met in executive session for about a half hour previous to this meeting, where we discussed matters related to job performance of an individual. We approved homeschooling request in the minutes of our executive session minutes from 11/7/19. The votes for the homeschooling and for our executive session minutes were unanimous and carried 5-0. That being said, is there a motion to seal the records of the executive session?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to seal the records of the executive session.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to the consent agenda, which was our reference number 1. Is there a motion to approve, or are there any of those agenda items that need to be pulled? Seeing none, is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I second the motion.
Any further questions from the committee? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to the public agenda, just to let the public know, any agenda items for the remainder of the meeting are open to the public. If any votes are taken and we make a motion before we actually call for the vote, the public will be asked for their input. That being said, I guess we can move on to agenda item number 6, which is the F21 budget workshop.
First, we just want to pass out these late additions, if you don't mind. No?
No, you can. They're really just my notes, so you can add them, but I just figured I'd give you copies as well.
So did you want to start this, Sarah? I
Sure.
assume.
Am I on? Yes.
I-
Okay.
I have a major confession that I was not able to go through this packet.
That's okay.
So I just did not have the time, but I promise you I will be more diligent at the next meeting.
No, that's okay. And really, this is a little bit of an unorthodox setup that we have, but I think given certain circumstances and where we're sitting financially that we're going to get into, we thought that this would probably be the best manner is to have it in a workshop where there's a little bit more dialogue. It's still so early. We don't even have the budget books back from principals yet. So we really just want to take you through some of this. So you have your binders.
Yep.
I'll tell you where I'm going so you can follow along with me because I am going to jump around. So I'm actually going to jump to the summary tab. So the first page in the summary tab is November 1st, the projections that we gave to you for the November 1st. Really, we wanted to start there, although it's somewhat of a wild card. I did go through and look at some trends and some expectations, assuming all things remained equal. So that you've already seen. If you flip to the second page, this is where I have updated for what I know to be right now. The biggest issue that we're going to start off facing is the state education aid. So if you look on RIDE's website right now, and we'll go over those documents because I do have them in the front of your packet, it looks like we are projected to lose $63,000. That is based off of March 1st enrollment. So before this was released, I did get a call from RIDE saying, We just want to let you know that based on current enrollment, it looks like your actual state aid is going to be a decrease of $748,000. So I did add that into the column.
We it's not just the current enrollment.
Correct, and we'll go over
Okay.
it. So it's, we have a decrease in enrollment, and also our state share ratio decreased by 2%. So both of those factor into quite a significant decrease in state aid. So salaries, I also did update that because we were able to run a projected salary increase, assuming that the staffing remains exactly as it is at this point in time. As we get into the year, we'll do what we've done the last couple of years and go subject by subject, especially at the secondary levels, to look at enrollment and determine number of FTEs. We'll also continue to watch the enrollment at the lower grades. That's really where we're starting to see some of those decreases, as the kindergarten classes coming in smaller. But it does take a while to roll through the system, and keep in mind that we still have 5 elementary schools. So even when we have lower enrollment numbers, it doesn't always mean that we can adjust staffing accordingly. Even this year, some of our elementary schools have several kids displaced because we tried to reduce class sizes, and it ultimately ended up displacing students from their community school. So what that means, if you look at the projected surplus, and I'm really just looking at that FY 2021 column, I'm showing a projected deficit of $1.6 million, and that's with a 3% increase from the town.
I'm sorry, I
So-
missed that. What was the percent?
A 3% increase from the town. So this little sheet that I handed out was really just my notes that I was writing down as I was going through some of this. So from a tuition revenue on the CTE side, I just billed $944,000 earlier this week, of which $240,000 of that will be graduating seniors. So next year they won't enroll. So we have to hope that we can come up with at least 16 more students. On the expenditure side, we have the contractual raises included, as well as any step increases. On the benefit side, we have the contractual co-pays, and I have a projected 6% increase. We will continue to talk about healthcare and decide, how we want to move forward with that. I'm also waiting on some updated information on some of the changes that WB's made, so that we can look at all of that in totality. On our purchase services side, so right now we have 3%. When I looked at the out-of-district enrollment, however, we only have a handful of kids that are going to be graduating seniors. So that means that we're not going to have as much relief with our seniors that are out of district graduating, so that, we can have some offset. And there definitely was an increase, I think, as a result of what happened last year. I brought up Exeter West Greenwich. We have a handful of kids now going to Exeter West Greenwich as 9th graders that were not there previously. I think at Pontiac we have 45 students there, I believe, and only 5 of them are seniors, and it's a big 9th grade class. So I definitely am concerned that we're not going to have a lot of seniors graduating to make up for any potential new students that want to go out of district. Additionally, we'll have the final transportation, so we'll need to look at final bus routes, determine the number of buses, if that's going to change. We also provide additional transportation for ESSA students. That definitely created an over expenditure in the budget last year, as that's really hard to plan for, and we are required to pay. And then technology services, I do, the 3% projected increase is almost, I don't want to say like an inflation, but that those typical items do go up, and then we have all of these other issues that we do need to address as we go through. On the supplies, we have a projected increase of 3%. Just note that that 56,000 also includes utilities. So if we can make some savings with solar, that could have a positive impact there. We know that we need a new ELA curriculum, so that's going to be an adjustment there. We do have some flexibility, hopefully, in some of our math curriculum that we ended up paying for over 2 years, that we can hopefully shift that now to the ELA curriculum. But I don't anticipate it will be a complete coverage there. Principals are working on their school-based assessments. While they have always given me a detailed list by account of what they need, we have encouraged them to make sure that they're properly reflecting all of their needs, so that we don't get into situations where things are not being budgeted for or purchased just because there is such a, I hate to say complacency, but it's just, things have not been provided for so long that I think people have forgotten to ask for things that they need. So we've been trying to really work with our administrators to have them meet with facilities and meet with technology and meet with special ed, so that there's a lot of cross collaboration to make sure all of those items that are truly needed are getting budgeted on a regular basis. And utility changes, if any of our utilities go up greater than that amount, and a projected amount, we could have additional supplies expense. On the equipment side, again, just like I mentioned, we're doing more cross collaboration to make sure things are getting budgeted. A couple of things that came into note just this year was proper replacement of walkie-talkies. So there was never any like a budget for regular replacement of walkie-talkies. So it was like all of a sudden everything was gone and we were doing expensive replacements. Same with our AED machines. Those had not been serviced. So we just had to enter into like a purchase service agreement to get those, so that if there was an emergency, they would actually work. So it's just things like that that we have identified that really have to go in that budget, and we will bring that forward to you. So any of those significant changes, some of it might be not necessarily a new initiative, but things that we just weren't really taking care of properly. And then a review of our facility needs, and clearly we're going to have some needs on our technology side. So that will all be coming forward. And the last component is the Perkins grant that we have that covers a good chunk of our culinary and Cosmo program is being changed from Perkins 4 to Perkins 5, which is federal money. However, we're losing about $120,000 from that federal funds, the way that they're restructuring it. So as it stands, for us to continue offering those programs, that would be an addition to our budget between salary and supplies and equipment that we will have to account for. On the career and tech side, we are looking at it. We put together a pretty comprehensive spreadsheet that the career and tech in high school has access to and is working on, and then payroll and I will go in as well to look at each program in career and tech, broken down by number of teachers and their support personnel, how much money we're bringing in, how many students out of district versus how many students in district. It's a little interesting because a lot of our students use the career and tech in some capacity or another. Right, so we are trying to look at that. Some of the programs that we're not tuitioning in right now are also programs that are very popular at other schools. So that's kind of that gamble, is to get rid of it. Do we then risk them leaving? But I anticipate that we'll be spending a lot of time looking at that, as well as all of our other programs, to make sure that we're really trying to maximize where we're at. So that's kind of the quick overview. We're not going to really drill down into details because I don't even have all of those line items yet, but I am happy to answer any of those questions that you have. But I want to jump back over to the funding formula and the revenue. And there is actually a public hearing tonight. So it's nice that there is getting some traction.
Yeah, I did see that.
And I did put some of the presentations that have been posted to date in your packet, so you can go through. I'm a little concerned because it did call out 3 communities, Pawtucket, Providence, and Woonsocket, as being drivers. And I'll share with you where my concerns are in the funding formula, and hopefully we can have some traction or be heard at the state level, and we'll have that opportunity. So under that revenue tab, I did put the emails in there from Kristen Cole because she did confirm with me through email. So if you look at that second email at the very bottom is where she's saying in the update using 10-1-19 average daily membership guesstimate, again because they're trying to project out enrollment. And that's where you see the $784,000 decrease. And I wanted to put that in there because the documents that are published on RIDE's website don't look that bad. So I just wanted you to have that information as we move forward. So if you flip into the first long spreadsheet, which is the FY 2021 enacted aid, this is really for all communities. And in that column B is where you see the formula aid reduction of the 63,000. But again, if you look up, I'm sorry, it's not on that page. I think you have to flip in a couple more pages. It shows you that it's using the March enrollment. So if you flip to the next formulary calculation spreadsheet, that's where it shows you that they're using the March 1st, 2019 enrollment data.
Yep.
So, and then the other component, I'm just gonna pop this out so you can look, as you keep flipping through, you'll come to something that looks like this spreadsheet. That is the state share ratio for the community calculation. And this is where our state share is at 56%, which is a decrease of 2% from the previous year. And really how they come up with that calculation, they're comparing the district RADM to their EWAV, and then divide that by the state's EWAV and their state's enrollment, and then there's a formula to come up to that 56%. So that is essentially the driving, those are the two driving factors, is the drop in enrollment and the drop in the EWAV share. And then just to give you some more happy reading information, if you flip to the back of that section are the two presentations that have been presented as part of these public hearings. And so it really kind of dives through the funding formula in itself. So if you want to start on the second presentation, that is the legislative task force to study the education funding formula. So to understand the funding formula, this definitely, those are some really good slides if you want to dive into it.
Okay.
And it gives you what the intent was. I think I highlighted the principles of the formula was a predictable method of distributing education aid. It's a predictable formula, but it's not very reliable from a maintenance perspective. And it also said that it's based on the principle that the money follows the student. And that is one of the things that I struggle with, because in Coventry, we're not at a situation where we could shut down another elementary school.
Right.
Even if we had that significant of a drop in enrollment, we don't even have the capacity to do that. And when you look at 7 schools and 13 grades, even a 100-kid reduction in enrollment doesn't necessarily equate to being able to reduce your costs by what they're reducing the state aid. And then staying in that one, and I know I'm jumping around, and anytime you want to stop me or have me slow down, there's one that's called, it's slide 9, and it's called the core instruction amount. And I think that this is really where I hope some emphasis is placed at the state level. It talks about what's included in the core instruction amount, and the core instruction amount has a dollar associated with, and that dollar is what's multiplied by our enrollment and then multiplied by our state share ratio to come up with part of the basic funding formula. But if you look, it says the core instruction amount includes costs related to face-to-face teaching, classroom materials, pupil teacher program, so on. But what it doesn't include is teacher retirement, food service, transportation, and that's a big one now that
It's
we're
big
being
for us.
required to provide certain transportation. Utilities and maintenance, debt service, out-of-district tuition. Again, out-of-district tuition was fine when they said if you offer a program, they have to stay with you. But if they're going to change it and now that's not going to be factored into the formula, that's an issue. So I think their core instruction amount that they're using is artificially low because it's excluding so many of these costs. So I know that that's not something that we can change at this table, But I think since these hearings are taking place, having you, giving you those tools to kind of look through some of this, hopefully we can get some traction going forward.
Sorry, I was just going to say, one of the things that stands out to me, and I highlighted, was when they did the work, they predicated on the assumption that the existing system in 2010 was sufficiently funded.
Right.
But that was during the economic downturn, and we all know it was underfunded, right, because people were cutting. So they took that base rate, and they just went from there. The other thing is they're averaging between Massachusetts, Connecticut, with, again, the assumption that the other states are adequately funded. So they kind of balance out, I'm assuming, in the New England region,
Right.
sort of an averaging, cost averaging. And I know they take into effect, I did some I mean, I'm not a mathematician, and you have to be to understand this. You
Yes.
probably understand much more. And I understand they take the wealth of the community, and I understand they take median income into effect. The difficulty in our community is we're a middle-income community, whether people want to acknowledge it or not. We're kind of, we're in the middle on everything, our tax values, our home values, everything. And we're sort of caught in that drag where we have a lot of families that move in because we're affordable, but we don't have the taxable base that they think we have. And so when we go to tax, we don't have the levy of, let's say, Newport, people look at Newport and Barrington, and they say, well, their tax rate is less. Well, yeah, but we don't have $2 million homes on the water because there are assessments that are offsetting the $300,000 homes. So, right, well, it's predicated on property tax. So that's where we get our base from. So, that's what people, I think, are not getting out of this whole thing, is that state share ratio isn't calculated. We're falling in what I find is we fall into a donut hole. Would you agree?
Right.
Kind of
yes.
how it just works out. In simple terms, we're in the middle, and the middle is not a good place to be. Either if it's high end or the low end in the state. The low end gets more assistance. The high end has a tax capacity. We're stuck in the middle.
Right.
Right. Okay.
I took a look at the table there on assessed values by city and town, and we're actually 8th from the top for assessment. I can't understand why Barrington and Tiverton and Cumberland have lower assessed values in the region. I don't understand where it came from. We are below Warwick, we are below Providence, but there's a very high assessed value against Coventry. And in this algorithmic formula, it's hurting us because they assume that we can tax against that assessed value. And I'd like to, well, I'm just a citizen, right? I'd like to have somebody, go back to the state at least and ask, where are you getting these assessed values? How does Bristol come away with a smaller assessed value than us? It was blatant.
So Lee, they actually we provide that information. They get it to the states for our valuation. So it's based on the total property valuation. There's a net, right?
How do they come up with these cheaper assessed values in these towns where everybody wants to live because of the quality of the school, because of what they think is the money that's going into the school? I think Coventry was, let's see, 20th on the total amount going into the school, 44 million.
Something like that, yeah.
Property tax.
Sounds
This
about right.
presentation is based on FY
19.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was like $44 million.
Oh, your state data, yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
But when you go over to the east side, they're not putting in $44 million into the school.
Right, because community size matters, school population matters, the state offset matters. There's a lot of things that go into that equation. And so it's not a simple linear equation for each community. Well, I think we're most comparable with probably Cumberland
Right.
in what I'm seeing. And they're suffering cuts too. Actually, they've had a little bit more of a strain than we've had in the past,
Right.
surprisingly, in some areas financially. So I think that's the closest community that we could probably draw some comparison to. But again, some of the benefit there is their location to proximity to Boston and other places that do drive some home values there. So,
Kingstown put $6 million more into their education. And take a look at their star rating for their high school.
Yeah.
If we can compare dollars put in, the star rating, North Kingstown
I think one of the things that we struggle with here is like, so we're trying to focus on here and now. We can look historically, but when I start looking back, and you look back in North King, like there's some variables that are different here. So I think the challenge we face now is, okay, but here's our here and now. And, we do lots of presentations. We'll have some more coming up about, we just met tonight with the administrators, looking at our data and looking at, because the community needs to see, okay, this is our data, but what are we actually going to be doing about this in different areas and different levels? And we'll be doing that. I think for the purpose of tonight, we can look at numbers and say if they're accurate or not, but these are the numbers that we have to work with now. I think our goal here is obviously to present what we believe we're facing right now. And also, we're going to get into it a little bit, the goals that we've set as central office about, all right, what we feel is important with this budget that we need to stay true to. And also hopefully some innovative things that we're going to do to also generate revenue, because that's something that we've talked a lot about. We know we need to look at other areas, and we have a few areas that we're going to talk a little bit about. But tonight's, like I said, our preliminary, giving you the data that we have, even going back to the 3-year projection, it's based on the formula and how much it can change. We do it, but let's be honest. In terms of the state aid in any of the component, we're,
Madam Chair.
next year's going to be, the challenge that we're focused on now.
When he's finished. Go ahead, Mr. Florio.
Just wanted to see if you were finished.
How many students are you?
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Okay.
We really should kind of limit the public until we're ready to discuss, if we could.
Okay.
But, Mr. Florio, go ahead.
Madam Chair, I've done some research into this. I believe, I spoke to George Carullo yesterday, the person who developed the Carullo Act. He's a friend of my cousin, and we spoke on the phone, and we had
Can I just stop you for 1 second,
Yes.
Dave? Are you finished, Sarah, walking us through with what you're going to walk us through? Because I think we should probably finish that, and then we can start asking questions.
Well, this
'cause-
isn't a question. This is.
Or even statement.
This-
So I
this
don't
is
want
a
to
legitimate
disturb.
statement from the person who.
No.
who desi-
I think,
okay.
I'm just, I would like to stay on task in the sense of at least getting through the presentation first and then opening it up for our discussion first, our questions, and then statements, and
You
then
can shut
bringing
me
it out.
down, Madam Chair. That's okay. I'll speak later.
Okay. I should have stopped Mr. Estel when he first asked his question, but I didn't want to be a downer. But anyway, I assume you're not finished.
Okay, so, well, we
Or
can
are you close
continue
to it?
on. Yep.
Okay.
So in this revenue packet, I also provided all of the same data for last year, so you can kind of go through and compare. And I think it is interesting to look at. Most of the communities that have big numbers, like North Kingstown, they received a decrease last year, and they're getting over $1 million this year. So Exeter West Greenwich is being cut $800,000 this year, or this coming year. So there's a lot of material in there, but again, it was mostly for your reference. The last thing that we really wanted to go over, and as we said at Ad Staff today, regardless of what we think is ultimately going to happen, where the funding is going to come, what school committee wants to move forward with, what the council is willing to support, and ultimately what the taxpayers are willing to do. We still feel that we have a responsibility to present the budget that's necessary to run the school. I think the last couple of years, we've gone forward with a responsible budget, still clearly missing some things, and then we were trying to scramble to make all these cuts at the end of the game, so to speak. So we're trying to start this year slightly different, to say this is where we think we are going to go forward, and we can even run simultaneous budgets to say if this is where we think the council wants to support us, then we'll start that from the very get-go to show what the discrepancies are in the educational programs that we'll offer. But in order to do that, we really have to be able to drill down and make sure that our budget is properly aligned to the goals that we have as a school district, school committee, central administration, and then building administration. So under the presentations tab, the first sheet are some goals that central office has kind of come up with. Each building principal is also allocating their or identifying their primary goals. And then we did put in a sheet that we can either discuss now, or we can, you can work on it to kind of formulate the school committee's goals and where they want to see the system move. Because I think we're at the point where it needs to be very thought out and thorough and almost well executed according to a plan in order to really make it clear why we need the funding that we need. I have a hard time sitting here easily making recommendations to come up with a $1.6 million cut. So we need to strategize a little bit more, and that's why we thought that a work session and breaking it down in this format would put us all on the same page.
Okay.
So I don't know if you want to add anything or.
The goals are important, and we're definitely not looking to say, okay, we want you to cut here and there. We have to do our due diligence
Well,
moving
that's
forward.
what I was asked. That's what I was asked. To come up with solutions to cut.
We didn't ask you that, Mr. Florio.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I didn't ask you to cut solutions. I think if you're taking something from me out of context, well, no, I'm saying is I have asked you to be an active
Well, I
participant
am an active
in the
participant.
budget, so,
And
right?
that's-
And I think, so that's what I've asked you, but let me finish here. So we focus on just the three goals, the core instruction, curriculum, professional development. We know that that's something that we've been working on. Let's see, there's an echo here. We've been working on, and we need to continue to work on. And you can, look at what we've put in place in terms of what we think are important in those areas. And a lot of this has been presented at school committee meetings already. But the second one is community engagement. We recognize that we need to get, we always talk about 20% of our community members have children in the schools. And we need to make sure that we engage the community. That's why we're doing this process. I know it's a little awkward, but we're down here. We want to have the public at our level so we can have conversations and discussions. And you'll see, just this week, we went and visited a community education program in Norwich, Connecticut. And they had an outstanding program. I think it's something that we'll present later on that we could actually implement and provide a lot of enrichment opportunities for the community, also with some adult service type of, certificate credential programs. So that's something that we'll do. And we want to increase the facilities use. Other than athletics, our facilities really aren't utilized at night. And we want to make sure that we do that. And then the third is just funding strategies. We know that, and I think it was discussed earlier, the conversation, my takeaway is that the system we have now is not sustainable, and property taxes is just not sustainable. So we're looking at the adult plan expansion, looking at any of our programs that we believe are exemplar, tuitioning students into that, not just the CTE. We have meetings, ongoing meetings around net zero metering in our energy, and we're looking to hopefully at the end of the day when we present proposals to you to have a significant, at least a couple $100,000 savings in terms of our energy. We're doing whatever we can do to increase school lunch participation. We may have to come back with an alternative plan at some point, but we know we can't continue to run deficits that we've been doing. We also want to look at, I went and met with Superintendent Barry Ritchie in Charahoe. They have a director of development position. It's 3 days a week. That person just brought in a grant worth $150,000. They were able to get a farm tech program for their CT through that person. We know that we just received that grant from the Round Foundation. If it wasn't for somebody that did that same type of work for us, we wouldn't have received almost that $500,000. So we're interested in actually looking at that and spending a little money, but to generate resources for us. And then the final thing is, we talked about the asset transportation. We're spending, approximately a couple $100,000 that we didn't budget for this transportation of students, whether they're foster children, DCYF, and we don't have a choice. we're exploring the opportunity of maybe purchasing some vehicles with, paying drivers, and that we could actually save money, transport our students, and potentially tuition other students in. If we're going to, Warwick and we go through West Warwick, we could transport those students. So we have to be creative and look at other ways to mitigate our expenses, but also to generate some revenue. So those are the areas that we focused on as our goals that we believe will drive, we need to drive the budget. So that's it on the goals.
Thank you, Mr. Levis and Sarah. So I'd like to start maybe with James, and just, I'd like to sort of do our usual sort of procedure, which is, I think it's the second meeting of the month, so we start with James and move this way. And then when everybody's had, your comment, or if you have some big questions or whatever, that Sarah and/or Mr. Levis can answer, then great. Then when that's done, we'll certainly bring it out to the public and let it be sort of basically a free-for-all, and let everybody, if one of the questions that is being answered, if someone from the public wants to speak to one of those, I'll allow it. But if you can hold your thoughts and questions until the end, that would be great. At any rate, Mr. Pearson, would you like to start?
Town also produced a 3-year revenue projection. Was that forwarded to all school committee members?
Oh, I did not. I can forward it to all. So in a response to the November 1st, it was sent to me. It was only a revenue projection. So I can forward that out to everybody.
Okay. We're at a very preliminary phase, so there's not a lot to discuss yet. I think can we do one thing you said we were going to dive a little deeper on, and maybe I missed it because you might have been going faster than I was, and I might have been reading something, and I apologize. So we're talking about reduction in state aid we did talk about the state share too. So it's a combination of enrollment and state share that's affecting what will be impacted on state aid. Okay. Do we know when the funding formula, the committee that's studying that, do we know when they are anticipating completing their work? Did they give a schedule?
Let me double check on I think they had a preliminary outline. Am I on? Okay. Let me just see. In one of their presentations, I think they had a preliminary outline of when they were. Oh, it doesn't have dates. So in the legislative task force to study the education funding formula, the second slide has a hearing outline, but it doesn't have dates. So I'm not completely sure as to when that will, but I will look to see if I can follow up and get any more.
And realistically, one of the I won't say risks, but one of the potential outcomes of that task force, we may not even see a change in the funding formula for the next fiscal year. If the legislature decides to change it, it might not happen until the following year. So I don't know. I don't know if we can expect much to come out of that task force for this coming fiscal year.
Yeah, and was it a law that was actually passed,
The legislature, yeah.
it was law, so I don't think we'll see it for this coming fiscal year at all.
Unless they move quick. So
They're not-
we won't see it
they're-
for this coming fiscal year. Just kidding.
It's typically not,
They typically don't move that fast.
yeah, so,
So we're pretty much status quo with the funding formula for this coming fiscal year. I think that's a relatively safe assumption to make, not one that benefits us. I don't know. This is going to be a tough one. I don't have much further to comment on that until we start diving deeper into the numbers and seeing the recommendations that come forth. So that's all I have for the moment.
thank you, Mr. Pearson. Mrs. Colonian.
Sarah, thanks for putting this together. I did go through a little bit last night, but you, and as James said, there's not really a lot of information here, but I'm just curious. You mentioned career and tech and it triggered something. Did we get an increase in students going into career and tech this year? Do you
I
know
can
for
run.
sure?
So from what I'm billing, it's about
Not out of district, as
in
far
district,
as us.
right? In district. I'm
Rather
just
than going
thinking-
out of district, did
So
we?
I can pull up the numbers for comparison. It does. I believe we went up slightly. Not
But
by
we
hundreds
did,
of
we
thousands.
went up slightly with the out of district also, is
Right.
that correct?
I'm just
Right.
trying. Yeah, we went out. We went
Yeah.
up more out of
Right.
district
Because
than
of
we did
everything
in
that
district.
happened.
Most of our programs are there's a larger number, what am I looking for? Enrollment this year of our own students. So we have, I believe, over 900 of our students, and we have what 1,400, 1,500
Did anybody
students.
come from out of district to us?
Right, we did have some, but if you look at, we had more students go out,
Yeah,
though.
that's what I was wondering. I was
Right.
wondering if we got,
Right.
a lot of students in.
And just wanted to just, I just wanted to say, I should have spoken when Mr. Pearson was speaking, but, Sarah had mentioned we have 1.6 million. The real challenge is, I don't know where we're going to cut that.
Oh, I know.
We're at a point where, unless we change, and there's certain things that I'm not going to, at least I'm not going to say this year that I did before, because we saw how that worked out, So that's the real, we're saying we have to dive deep. That's the real challenge. So I think we have to find other ways of, and I agree wholeheartedly with Mr. Pearson, this isn't going to change the funding formula. If it does change, it's not going to impact, I don't see it impacting us. We have a better shot at changing that guidance around CTE students having school choice when nobody else does, right? That we have a better shot, I believe, of changing that.
Yeah.
Because of the impact it has on numerous communities. So, but we have more students, I think, taking. We had a great enrollment in the Navy ROTC. We had 20 students coming
that's
for a
awesome.
freshman, which is great. Because before we had like 30 some odd, and now we have 50, 51 students, and we had several out of district. But the issue comes down to expenditures and revenues. So, anyways, I don't want to take any more time, but I
No,
just
that's
wanted to
okay. No,
acknowledge that.
that was my only question.
Yeah, I can pull it up, but I want to say last year I billed about 920,000 in career and tech, and then this year I'm billing 944. So it did increase, but our
Out of district increased more. Yeah, that's, we got to stop the bleeding there.
And that's where, and we did have some of these conversations with council members last year, it's that fine line to cut those programs too, especially to cut it to reduce a budget rather than cut to reinvest. So there's different levels of conversation when you look at a career in tech, because again, so I can pick on the Bionet, I don't see any tuitioning in, but we have 120 students there. So that would be one to be scary to reduce, even though you're not getting
Oh,
revenue
yeah.
from it, because that potential to leave is huge. And then you talk about driving down and really making a couple of core programs strong ones. There's potential there, but again, I would make that caveat that to reduce those costs, we have to have that guarantee that we're going to be allowed to reinvest it. And right now, we're at this catch where we have to find cost savings and also spend money to kind of improve things and make money, so to speak, like that.
And
Professional business development.
Those career and tech, I mean, that really, if you've got a career and tech program in your school, it's a great program, and kids really look forward to that. A lot of kids that really are not, they sit there and they're like, oh, I don't know if I want to go to college, but I want to learn this skill, or, and they may get in there and say they like it and, still go on to college, or they may be like, a welder and go to Electric Boat and they've got a job, So I would not want to get rid of career and tech at all. I think that it really is a good program. Coventry's always been strong with their career and tech. That's all.
Thank you. Mr. Murray?
Do you mind if I go last?
Sure.
I'm going to see.
Mr. Florio?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. When I got the call saying that we were gonna have this meeting this evening, I felt like we were having our back put against the wall. My question is, when was the last time we received any funds for maintenance of effort? And did you know that the council breaks state law by not paying us maintenance of effort?
Right, so the town provides maintenance of effort by making sure that they're not funding us less than what they did the previous year.
Right.
I
but-
would argue state does not meet a maintenance of effort at all. I mean, I
Okay.
don't even understand how that's not included in part of the funding formula.
No,
But so, right, so I know that several years ago, there was an agreement where only a portion of money that was given to the school counted as maintenance of effort. But my understanding is that that was agreed upon by school committee council and the attorneys that were existence in that time. I believe it was a $600,000 nut. I think they gave us a 1.2 increase and 600,000 counted towards maintenance of effort. But I would have to go back and double check. That's the only
right.
thread of not meeting maintenance of effort on the town side. They've always given us at least what they gave us the previous year.
And we know that a judge does the ruling when it comes to our budget. And we had an audit done, correct? Our audit has been done?
So for 2019, the audit is still in process right now,
Okay.
so it's due December 31st.
So we're all set there. We'll be all set there,
We have annual audits every single year, yes.
okay? And from what Mr. Carullo, from what we were discussing, he says, quote, "This is crazy, what we've been going through in terms of level funding, cutting instructors every year, and I'm not going to vote for cuts. We've cut enough. It's time for us to invoke the Carullo Act. That's what I was advised. That's what I think we need. And if the town is saying they're gonna zero base our budget, if they say they're gonna zero base our budget, if they're not gonna give us any money, and the state is doing what they're doing, and we're looking at a $1.6 million deficit, what's it gonna be next year? 2 million, 3 million? It has to stop somewhere. And when they do the investigation, they also investigate the town side, and they look at what the town's budget has increased over the last 10 years as opposed to the school side. And I believe last year the estimate was the town received 60% of the investment money over time over the last 10 years, and the school department has received 7% over the last 10 years. To me, it's ludicrous to keep trying to cut teachers, lay off another 350, lay off another 350 teachers, cut programs, cut everything that we've accomplished at the Career in Tech, making a career pathway. It's ridiculous, and the schools are in the situation they are in because the council never gave us a maintenance of effort to take care of our schools. We're down. Okay,
So let me just say something, okay? And the bottom line is that.
that's what I see, Mr. Levin.
Right, and I'm not gonna argue with what you see, but I can speak for myself and everybody that works with us. We work extremely hard to have a positive relationship with the town. This process, I was over today talking to Mr. Arnett, Ms. Mangiarelli and I are talking about setting up weekly meetings with Mr. Wazika, Mr. Arnett, and starting the budget process with, and again, I have no control over what you say or what you believe, and but to start off by saying Carullo, when in good faith, we plan on working with the town, and we know this is a tough year. We've known this, but we've been working extremely well with the, I believe, the council and the municipal side. And, all I'm saying is I need to separate myself because I don't agree, but I want to separate myself with all due respect of your comments because I don't want people watching, and they will, and I want to make sure that it's clear because I'm the one tomorrow that's going to have to work with people, right? Right? You can do whatever you need to do and talk to whomever you want to. It doesn't, I don't see that helping the process. And again, I don't want to be disrespectful.
I just don't want to see another 1.6 million.
Right, but when I said to be about active, Mr. Fleur, because you had mentioned something before, I'm saying like, where's the conversation with the council, right? Like, it's easy to go behind a mic and say something, or people go on Facebook or whatever, but like the face-to-face, anytime I have a situation, and I'm not trying to lecture you, but anytime I have an issue, I try to meet with people face-to-face because I want people to see me. I want to be able to see them and have the dialogue. And that's what I'm saying. I don't see this helping us right now because I don't know where we're going to cut 1.6 million. We can't cut 1.6. I'm going to tell you that, right? But we're going to work very hard. People have worked so hard to get to this spot, and to start off by saying, basically, this is what we're going to do because this council has worked with us.
Okay.
They worked last year. You were at the same meetings I were, so I was at. So that's all. I don't want to go on, but I wanted to make that statement. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Levis. And so I just have one question for you, Sarah. And the 1.6 deficit is based on getting 3%, correct? So that's what I want everybody to realize. It's not just a deficit of 1.6 if we were level funded. We are still asking for an increase, a 3% increase, and we're still going to be left with the 1.6 million deficit, unless somehow, somewhere, the town council agreed to give us more than 3%, which would mean that the other side, the municipal side, would not get 3% or whatever the left of the, it's not even 3%, it's the levy or whatever. I'm always confused by that, and I don't understand that, but obviously they would have to take a much, much lower piece to give us even enough to even, I don't know, if we got all 4%, would we still make the 1.6? What would be our amount be? Do you have any idea?
I'd have to ask John
look
what
at it.
the max
What that would
increase is
mean.
on the levy
Yeah.
to confirm. But I think while the schools are hurting and
Yeah.
while we can go back in time about the discrepancy
Right.
of appropriations between school and town, I think there's significant needs on both school and town side.
Exactly.
So, I think we've been approaching this point for a couple years and we've been making some headway. I think this school in town worked very well putting together a budget last year, regardless of whether or not it failed the first time. I think that was still, we made our voices clear at that time. And I do think for the most part, the council heard us going through the process. And I know that there's a lot of frustration on the town side for departments that had to make adjustments as well.
Sure.
So this is early. We're presenting to the town December 9th. There is a budget timeline in the back of that presentation for you as well. But I think we would be remiss not to try and work together with the town to try and get through this because this problem didn't start overnight, and it is certainly not going to be fixed overnight.
It certainly
So-
won't be fixed overnight because we do have a cap. And so, and to actually ask the state to go over that, I'm not sure they would in fact do that, as well as, I don't know if our taxpayers would as well. So I'm so grateful that we do have the relationship that we do have with the town side, because quite honestly, that's where it's going to happen. We can't fight with them. We have to work with them. And from our point of view, I think the goals, that's going to be tough for us, and it's going to be tough for everyone who works in schools, because I see them all as very lofty and great. I mean, why would you not want to do what's listed here? So from the school committee's point of view, I think I can't imagine any of us saying we wouldn't want these goals. The question is which goals. I'm not really sure exactly what you're asking us to do, in the sense, should we be thinking about what's our priority, that you can't take something from X? And so should we do a 1 through whatever? And then, I mean, I think it's realism that we're going to have to make some cuts unless some miracle happens. So, and that's, when I say miracle, I don't mean that the town council isn't going to work with us or the town side administration. I think they're going to work as diligently as they can. So I know that our job is to look at these goals and try to come up with what we think is more important perhaps.
I
or
just think,
not.
yeah, and to
You
just
know.
clarify, just we're reflecting on our process last year, you know, and I'm reflecting on the process prior to that. So remember we said we wanted to engage, not just, we want to engage the committee and the public. So we didn't want to just say, well, obviously, you know, the administration and with our educators, and we come up with, you know, there's a lot of variables that drive what we believe is important in our goals. But we wanted to give the committee an opportunity to articulate, like, I guess if you're asking me, what I'm looking for is, will you support these goals? Do you believe that they're important, that these are drivers in terms of that we as the administration and as the school community will stand behind and say, justify, this is why, this is what we need to move forward and justify. So when we make cuts, right, looking at those goals and saying, you know, if this is what's important to us, we've got to find ways to minimize the impact on those goals.
What I'm saying is there's no need to make cuts.
Okay, Dave. I'm still talking. I'm still asking questions. Thank you for that explanation, and I certainly will take some time to look at each one of those. And I mean, on a first glance, they all, I don't know what I would say I would give up. So we'll, you know, I like the idea. I really do like the idea. I think it's very well thought out, and it does give the community something to look at as well, in the sense of, you know, what do we do as a school committee? What do we do as educators? I'm not sure the public gets it all the time. They see a school report card maybe, you know, I mean the RIDE report cards for our schools. They see their child's report card, but they don't probably understand that we have real goals that we're trying to accomplish. So I appreciate this plan, and I have no idea. Like I said, I admitted already that I haven't spent a lot of time with this. I'm sorry that I didn't do that, but I'm certainly going to spend some time going through the whole packet, reading the presentations, and making sure that I have a better understanding. I look forward to future detail on the budget. That being said, I think Mr. Murray, you were next.
So, where to begin? The budget process is hard, I know that. And I've gone through a few of them for municipalities before. And I did have a chance to look at the packet. I appreciate the goals. I think that, being truthfully, as a resident, as a parent, you know, we went through the budget process last year, and I hear the same story. And as a citizen, I'm frustrated because I didn't want to be here. And I know we don't have enough time to have a different narrative on this entirely. We can approach it a different way, but the narrative is still the same. We need money, right? So I think trying a different approach is warranted, and I've been lobbying for planning, really trying to come out with projections and try to chart a path, because one of the things that I have a problem with in voting for any budget this year is that, just like everybody in this town, I don't know where we're going. I don't know where CTE is going. I don't know what's going to happen next year, the year after that. I know what's in front of me, which is a compounding structural deficit. It's unsustainable. 3% is probably unsustainable tax rate, given that we couldn't even get one passed last year, let's be honest. So, and the town needs money too. So even if we levied 4%, we just can't tax our way out of it. The chances of changing the state funding formula, considering I have no state representatives in this room and I haven't seen one all year, is probably not, because it's not their priority either unless we make it their priority. And even at that, to get the legislature to act, it's probably not going to happen in the short term. So there's two sides of this ledger, and I look at goals, and one of the things that I didn't see in reviewing the goals, while I appreciate all the goals, they tend to be a little bit softer goals. And the number one goal for me, and I've written out, and I will share these after, but I created a spreadsheet and I created why these are my goals. But the first one was create financial stable path to the district. Because I think the number one educational thing we can do for our students is keep the same teacher, a qualified teacher, in the classroom, right? So not have to lay them off and then lose people, get kids worked up. Am I gonna have drama? Am I gonna have these programs? Am I not? And that is the number one thing that we could do for them to create an educational pathway for the greatest bulk of our students. And so I don't know how we do that, but I think it's gonna involve some hard choices. And I think the truth is about prioritization. We're all gonna have different priorities. Something is going to have to give. And we've gotta figure out where we're going as a school district and create a clear path to that. Because if we don't, we constantly take shots in the dark. I can tell you CTE has expanded in a time where we've had cuts. But I don't know on a cost-benefit analysis if we're actually, from what I'm hearing, we're not generating more income out of that. Now, we may not be losing the kids, but I don't know. I have no data-driven to give me that decision-making basis. So the tough thing for me in this position is I don't have the relative numbers to look at that and say, is CTE worth it? Or do we recraft a program on a pathways model to afford the kids the same goal of curriculum and allow them the opportunity to at least explore, but at a little bit better rate for the taxpayer, the people out here? So I guess what I'm saying is, from my standpoint, is one of the things this year is, I don't want to say deconstruction year because it's actually reconstruction, but we may have to actually look at programs to strategically cut in order to reinvest in 5 years. And it's painful in the short term, but on the 5 or 10 year outlook, we're actually at a place where we can expand as a district and start focusing on being a better school district. And so if that takes some short-term pain and some short-term cuts, I'm okay with that if we can strategically show that through investments over time, we can get to a better outcome. And I think that's just what hasn't happened. We take shots in the dark. The adult ed program, I think it's a valid thing. But honestly, if you come to me with it, I need to know that if we hire another person in and expand another program, that it's not going to end up costing the taxpayer more money, because the whole program is, there's two goals. Engage the community, which is a lofty goal, but I want to focus on educating the kids. I don't want to steal the money from the kids that are in the classroom to pay for an adult ed program. So I need to know on a cost benefit, like, what's the numbers look like? And I agree with an adult ed program. I think it's about, and I know we have additional money for it. Well, what I don't want to do is pour more money from the district into it on expanding opportunities. Same thing with CTE. I know there's programs there now that just don't have the kids. And so as we craft this budget, I guess what I'm asking for, the input I can provide at this point is, and it sounds like you're doing it, you're going to start looking at that CTE model, is really start looking hard and come to some tough terms and come to us and say, these are the hard decisions you're going to have to make. And unfortunately, there'll probably be cuts, because I'm looking at the math. Even if the council just says, you can take the entire 4%, we're not going to make it.
Nope.
The state's not giving us more money. It's a math equation. So, you know, I look at this and I say, well, how do we create? So we can create more revenue. So the solar is great, and anything we can do to generate revenue is a great thing, if it's a valid revenue stream. So sometimes things seem like valid revenue streams, like we could lease out our buildings. But if it costs us money in breakage of equipment or the custodians to now maintain those facilities, that's not a net increase, right? So that's the sort of stuff I'll be looking for is it a true revenue gain? And that comes with numbers. So that goes back to planning, right? If we need to invest in some outside firm to come in and tell us recommendations on CTE, to give us financial numbers on how we can raise revenue based on what other school districts are doing, I just don't see that we have the resources in-house to be able to do this anymore. We just don't. I mean, you're tasked out with 10 different things. We already know admin's tasked out. But we need someone to kind of come in and tell the community how we create the sustainable path. And then we can point to that plan and say, we have a 10-year plan. We have a 5-year plan. We can take it step by step, and we're going to have short-term pain but long-term gain. So my core mission is to try to persuade the budget, and I'm going to tell the committee right now, my platform is, I want some money in for planning this year. And I know that may cause a cut in another program or a piece of furniture we can't buy. But that is an investment we cannot afford to make anymore. We can't. I'll stand with the wooden desk in the classroom for another 2 years. But we need to, take those furnitures and fixtures and equipment we need. I get it, but that's not solving our 10-year outlook. And I don't want to be in this situation in another 5 years. I'm committing, to helping the district, but I don't want to see this happen every year, so.
Can I just, so yeah, I don't disagree with a lot of what you're saying. However, we're in the winter season. Every single day we have kids that are cold in our buildings, right? So like, we haven't invested. So the thing is, I know this is your entry point. This community hasn't invested. First of all, the whole CTE thing, it wasn't intended to make revenue. The purpose of CTE was to provide career technical education opportunities for every student in Rhode Island. About 7 or 8 years ago, a very intelligent superintendent had an idea, was able to get the support. We lose kids because of the toxic environment that was here. We lost a lot of kids of that culture. Like I said, I've been around education for 35 years. I've never been in a community like this where instead of fighting for what you believe in, people just said to me, I'm out of here. Like, I'm out of here. People that work for us sold their house, moved, have their kids educated. To me, that's a foreign concept, but that's our reality in here, right? So I would be happy if, so we're in this, we've been forced into this, like the conversation revenue with CT, but we shouldn't be talking about. We should be saying, do we have quality programs that our kids are benefiting from? And are they furthering is it helping them vocationally, like longitudinal studies? Our kids that are coming out of cosmetology, right? We have a lot of students in that, but where are they ending 2, 3, 4 years? Those are the studies that we should be doing, I believe. So I think, unfortunately, we're forced into this competitive market. Many families have said to me, they go to Pontigansett, they have the bells and whistles. We can't afford the bells and whistles, but we have great programs, great teachers, a lot of good outcomes, but we need to do better with the data, I agree. But my point is, we can't even predict. We're doing a 3-year projection, and I'm going to share something at the end of this about, I shared with you, Councilwoman Ms. Bacon wanted to suggested a format, and I'd like to have your feedback on it. The bottom line, though, is that we don't know. There's so many variables here that it's challenging to do 10-year projection. And I'm all for it. When I first came here, somebody had recommended a performance audit, and I was involved in a community where a performance audit was done on the schools because the municipal side felt we weren't using the funds properly. It came back that they said we were a model for the state and the town needed to give us more funds, which they did. But my point is that there's so much going on right now. Like, our facilities are a huge detriment to this community. We know that the usable life of most of our facilities is probably expired. So I just don't know how, and I know you were talking about the projection, the plan, but I agree, we need to generate revenue. I just believe property taxes, like you said, we're in the middle. It's just not the way it needs to change moving forward. And so I don't look at these as these are goals in here that they may seem soft, but something that we haven't been able to pursue before, knowing that, and I've said I'll resign if I have to go before. I may not resign that day, but if I have to lay off 300 some odd teachers, I promise you I'm going to give my resignation, and it might be a future date because it's just not a way to do business. And I'm not, Mr. Florio, I don't think if it was one teacher laying off, I probably couldn't get you to vote for it. And that's your belief. You don't want to get that. But
that's why I say
we're in a tough environment here. And, again, I want to, I love the dialogue, but I just don't know how we're going to do a 10-year plan when we said, like, where we're going right now. I have no idea if anybody has ideas, but how we're going to cut 1.6 million if we get 3%. I have no idea how we're going to do that. I want to be honest.
Well, what I can say is Warwick's doing a 5-year projection, and forget, even if you say not 10-year, Warwick's at least doing a 5 because that's what their school committees asked for, and they're working on it. They're doing it. Is it going to be totally accurate? But I think saying that it's going to be a little inaccurate is not a reason not to plan, right? And what I'm getting at is we don't even have precise data on what things are costing us. So it's difficult to make valid decisions on program expansion or where we want to take our school based on the no data that we have. And so that's my concern. And I think as far as, looking at saying, well, we're not a committed community, I do believe this is a committed community. But there's only so much funds people, like there is a contingent of this population. I'm from this community, I know it. I've had friends from it that just doesn't have the money. And they're not wrong for just saying, I don't have the money. I mean, it doesn't make them bad people. It just makes them, you know, they're concerned taxpayers. And so we need to show we're doing everything we can and looking at all the data to balance out those other priorities on that list. It's not that they're not all valid, but the truth is, I just can't afford everything. And I'm asking you all to worry about the education curriculum, and we should too, but from the budgetary focus and lens that I have to go through right now, it's about choosing some hard choices to get this to a point where we're stable. Right now, we're running a deficit. It's like I'm on a credit card. I can't pay my bills, but yet I'm like, okay, but I still want to go buy the new car, and I still want to have the best of this, and I still want to make sure that my kids go to a private school. I can't do it all. So we've got to take those short-term measures to shore up the system, because like it or not, and I'm not going to go backwards, you're a big advocate for that, and I agree with that. We did get level funded. This is a structural deficit from years ago. We inherited this, but we're the ones who have to deal with it. So either we carry this forward year after year, and everybody knows we're going to get dragged in again. And I'm doing this because I don't want to cut teachers. I absolutely agree with that. That my number one priority would be not to cut a teacher, because I think they should be in the classroom, and that is the number one things we can do for a kid. But how do we get there if everything else is a priority? If everything's a priority, nothing is.
So if I can just jump in a little bit, as I mentioned, going through this, we do have a pretty detailed spreadsheet that we're pulling together for the career in tech. But really, it hasn't been the first time, and some of this was before me, that there have been things brought forward that could be a potential cost savings that was against the ideology of the committee or the community. And I'm going to pick on a hot button topic just for the sake of example, but I could have made a very clear case a couple of years ago that the ROTC program financially was not solvent. There's a difference between that and whether or not
Ideology.
Thank you. Is a direction that this community wants to support and embrace. So some of the reasons that we brought this forward was to say we need to know where the committee stands and community, but really first you, before we spin off on these tangents to say, listen, we think we can save cost here and maybe redirect there. If where we're thinking of reducing is something that is, you know, a solid no from the committee. The adult ed, I agree, we shouldn't be taking money from our K-12 programs to fund it. But I do have, in the one area that I have some money, it's restricted in adult ed. So we have to start saying, okay, we have this little bit of money here. How can we invest that and make something that maybe satisfies some needs in the community and also brings a little bit more value and could potentially enhance some of the programs if we utilize some of that funds in spaces that could be used by both adult ed and students. So we're trying to look at those areas, but I think my guess is that even amongst the committee there might be some differences on what career in tech should be, and picking on that because that's something that
May
we
I
can
add
talk
something?
about. Sure.
If we lost the kids from the ROTC program, they were all planning to go to Cranston East and Pontiac. We would have lost 20 kids, and we would have had to pay for them to go to the school. And to get back to what Luke is saying, that's why I'm saying that the Carullo Act, if we look at it, if we decide we want to go Carullo, we have a good case. We have an excellent case.
Dave,
And,
I would disagree with that because Warwick tried to go to that route and they had to, there's so many thresholds. You have to actually go and you have to see what fees you can charge. You have to go through, and as I do agree with the superintendent and the entire administration on this, we've had a great relationship. They are doing their maintenance of effort. We had a budget we felt was valid last year. It went forward, didn't pass. That wasn't their fault. That was the community's fault. I'm not blaming the community for denying it. That's their free will. But they didn't prioritize the budget, and there was impacts of that. But just throw out Carullo, that's big action. And that's basically a sign of saying we don't trust our council to support our schools. And I don't think that's the message that we've gotten from them. you know, I understand that you have a passion for the schools, but I don't want to throw this on council because I do think that they've been very good at working with us and trying to be amenable. I think they're budget conscious. And I don't think the taxpayers, you know, as I said, the bad guy in all this, you know, that they're expecting us to live within our means. And that may be uncomfortable because that doesn't always align with what, you know, I mean, even on this side of the street, I'm sure these buildings are falling apart. There's vehicles over there that got rust holes in them. And I know that people probably are, you know, like me in Warwick, bringing their own table and chair into work. You know, I mean, most municipalities don't run on luxurious budgets. But I think, you know, we're all feeling that. So I don't know if, I mean, the Carrillo Act is a big effort.
Beyond a big effort, there's like 10 things that have to happen before you can
Yeah.
consider it. We are not even in a
It's
position.
not even a level one.
But I,
We really aren't.
Well,
I do
the-
need to just
yeah.
say though, I really don't feel that we're in a luxurious budget either. So I just
No,
want to make sure that
we're
that's
not.
clear, is that, you know, I think, there aren't a lot of bells and whistles in here, and that makes it more difficult. But, and there's that expectation of living within our means, but from our own household budgets, we know that our utilities go up every single year. We know that our food bill goes up every single year. We know that our gas bills go up every single year. So I think that there is still a component that we have to convey that says, yes, we need to live within our constraints, but we have to pay costs as they go up, the same as anybody else does. And assuming, you know, even if the town level funded us, we're receiving less money from the state as our normal expenditures go up, even without expanding anything. So I just want to be cautious that it's a balance between, you know, recognizing that some of our taxpayers struggle and that we don't want to be an additional burden, but we also do have a responsibility to pay our electric bills and to educate the students. And I truly don't believe that there's a ton of bells and whistles in this budget. And I think that we do need to start comparing ourselves to the other communities around us, whether it be the ones that are going after and actually are getting capital funds to improve their buildings and investing in their curriculum and their schools, because we're going to start falling further behind. Unfortunately, that gap is going to become bigger. So I just...
Madam Chair, I knew I'd be the minority on this anyway.
No, I think we're just really premature to be even talking about Carrillo. And having sat on this committee in times past when it even has been discussed, our council, more than once and more than different councils, people have no, I mean our lawyer council. And it wasn't, you know, just one person who believed this, that by the time you get through the whole lawsuit, even if you win, it is so decisive in the community, and what you get for it in the end may not be worth all of what you put the community through, because you have to pay all the... Who makes the money in Carrillo? The lawyers, because they spend time in court. It's not, I mean, I think in Warwick, they kind of used it, and so that kind of changed the complexion from the mayor, and some people said, oh, we don't want to go through Carrillo. So it's not like you can't talk about Carrillo, but, you know, the history in the state has not been good as far as winning it. And even if you do, you need to get rid of everything. You get rid of all of your extracurriculars, your sports, your clubs. You are not given a choice.
And the thing is...
So it's awful. It's awful.
The real elephant in the room is not whether the town is funding us. It's the fact that the state does not fund education the way they should. That's the elephant in the room. And, you know, until we can get there and have our voices be heard, they're going to continue.
I mean, I think the other thing is, and I think Luke, you know, sort of brought this up, that we do have a structural deficit that's been built up by those years where we were on the winning side. We got extra money from the state because we were 3 million behind. But what this town and our townspeople didn't get was that that's how far behind we were with other districts. So it wasn't like we were getting extra money. We were just trying to get our way to being better funded compared to the relative communities around us. And so if the town didn't give us the taxes as well, because there's no law that says this is what your community should be giving you. So when you fall behind on that, and for those years that we were level funded, we've fallen behind. And so I think the town people have to know that. And yes, I know we can't go in the past and say, but that's the reason why we're where we are.
Well, and that's been the state's view on it, right? I talked to the House leader about this specific topic about funding formula, and he blatantly told me, well, if, you know, the municipalities wouldn't have squandered their money, we gave them the extras when the formula came out, then you wouldn't be in that scenario. So their take on it is, we allocated that money. The municipalities chose to squander that excess. Well, yeah. Well,
We didn't squander.
we didn't, but they chose to withhold it from the schools and basically
No,
use the
but
state
that's
money.
not true, I don't think. I think what happened was they said, oh, well, you're not being level funded. So they gave us maintenance of effort because there
They
was
gave us
no
the minimum.
law
Correct.
on the books that said that if in fact, what is your share? And that's really the crux of all of this and what needs to be passed. That if you're going to believe in a funding formula and you're telling a town that this is your share, if the share isn't met, then what good is the money coming from the state? Because it has to be, it has to come from both places
Correct.
for us to not have a structural deficit. And so I don't think the people who were running the town at the time understood that piece, quite honestly. Not everybody, because really people didn't talk about it. The funding formulas, families, is fairly, no, we knew we were being level funded, Dave, but I'm not even sure we all understood what our share should have been.
Yes, but there was a councilwoman who
Please
kept,
stop.
who kept saying
we don't
about
we don't want to talk about the past in the
uh,
sense, but even right now, Sarah, I mean, I don't know what our cost should be. What is the town supposed to give us per whatever in this formula? And is that enough to actually make it work? Obviously, I'm not sure it's going to be because we still have a cap. So we're caught in a difficult place. And so, but certainly the level of funding that we did in fact receive has put us in a structural deficit. And I mean, I think the funding formula is better than not having one. But it still needs to be worked on, and it's not going to happen this year. And so, and there's been a few things that have been the perfect storm for this community, unfortunately. And so, yeah, I don't.
Just to summarize my comments, I don't want to misconstrue that this is a very preliminary discussion. I've mentioned some programs. I mentioned them in the light of their examples, right? I'm not against any program, all I'm asking is to really invest in some data-driven decisions and however we get that data. And I know you're looking at that, but I do think that we may need some outside support on that. And we owe the public that, so they can look at it as well. Because I want to be able to point to something and say, we're not saying this specifically. This is somebody else even saying it. Like, this is where we need to go. And if we need to tax you at 3%, I want to be able to point to that and say, it's not just us saying it. It's somebody else who's looking at the numbers based on state comparisons and really digging deep and saying, you know what, this is the cost of doing business, ladies and gentlemen. And it is what it is. And if that, I'm willing to stand behind that all day long. I just want to make sure that we have that. And it's not because I don't believe the administration or anything else. It's just, it gives us that ammunition that we've looked at every aspect of this. Because I honestly don't know. I'm a pretty good problem solver. But I don't know how over 3 years, we close an almost $4 million deficit with no additional revenue generation, and we can't tax our way out of it. Like, I'm capped. So the math just doesn't work without cutting, right? So I don't want to go in with cuts, but we're forced into that situation. Now, if I said, I don't want to cut, then I can only generate revenue. So where are my revenue generation ideas? There's not a lot with schools. I looked it up. I Googled last night, and I'm looking at, like, how do you renting of facilities and all this stuff, but there's caveats to everything, right? So unless we start putting solar on every square inch of our sites and cell towers everywhere and advertising and starting letting people we're basically privatizing our schools. So I know you're looking at all aspects, if there's any unique ideas out there, including the public on how we close this budget. If anyone has a rich grandfather who wants to donate to the school system
For the next 5 years, no.
for the next 5 years, yeah.
But really, if the school committee wants to go a programmatic audit route, I'm not against that by any stretch. I actually think we're much better situated now in the way that we have our principals involved with the budget to do that. I would have said my first budget here, like when I first came in, you wouldn't have even been able to do a program budget because it wasn't truly done at that level. But I'm pretty confident in having somebody come in that they would have some adequate information to really truly do a program audit. And if they're gonna come up with ideas for generating revenue, then that's fine. We could look at RFPs to do that type of service. I know
What's
I'm
the
speaking of-
cost?
I have no idea. I mean, I really truly have no idea what a programmatic audit would be.
And Sarah, is there a way to do an analysis about maintenance of effort to see how many times the council would not adopt maintenance of effort?
Dave, I'm just gonna.
If they always
yeah.
did, they did
we-
not break
We
the
got to
state
get off
law.
the negativity with the council, Dave. I mean, we've got to do business tomorrow, right? I've got to do business tomorrow. This isn't, I just want to say, this isn't helping, so.
All right.
Level funding is maintenance of effort, Dave. Okay? So, and state law says you don't have to give more than what you gave the year before. And Sarah's correct. The state isn't even doing maintenance of effort. They're not even willing to say, we won't fluctuate like huge. Every single time every time I saw Ken Wagner, I would say, how is this possible that Coventry can get cut, be on the winning side, and then all of a sudden get cut $1 million from the state, and then the next year another 700,000. How do you make that work? And he basically just looked at me, and I'm sure the president commissioner would too. They just basically say, this is the funding formula. So, but they won't guarantee to say, okay, so any community, if this is what we're giving out, we're not going to decrease you or increase you more than 10% or something, and sort of spread out the figures, because they're certainly not doing that. Every year, there's a community in the list that's cut a huge amount of money. And then there's other communities that get a huge amount. So you say to yourself, how I mean, I know things change in communities, but that much? I mean, we changed that much in 1 year? It's like almost unbelievable to me.
Focusing on the
But-
solution to that,
Yeah.
have we sent out, we have a joint budgeting session coming up. Have we sent out any invites to our representatives in the Senate or House to that session?
No, I'm more than happy, and we usually do a legislative meeting in December,
In
January,
December.
but I
We do.
haven't
Haven't heard
heard anything
anything.
about
But
it.
I think it's important for them to understand, it would be great if we had them here to discuss this in front of them, because I'm not sure, while I know they may be aware of it, I don't know if they fully get the gist, and I don't know, but my hope would be that we could find an advocate, whether it's from our own legislative delegation or another, that, we're not the only ones going through this, and there's certain people who have championed education, obviously. Senator Pearson, I think, is in here. But, I do agree, there is no cushion, right? So it's a linear calculation, which I think was well intended, based on, is it Dr. Wong who came up with the
Yes.
calculation?
Yes.
But I think it wasn't done with a realization of how operations actually work in the real world. So that happens a lot, but I think, RIPEC's done, 5 studies on this. They've had task force, I think this is the 4th one, or 5th one, I don't know. This cycles, I think the last one had minor adjustments, but we'll see. Anyway, sorry to take up so much time.
It's not just the funding formula. The legislature hasn't been doing municipalities any favors. They made that excruciatingly clear last year. But simply as trying to emulate Massachusetts, but not giving us more money to do so is ridiculous. You can tell the speaker next time you talk to him, Mr. Murray. Back to the goals, because I think I'm processed finally what's being asked of us. I like having a goals list. What I see here is a combination of strategic and tactical goals. Not that I'm going to ask you to classify them as strategic and tactical, but for me to be able to do any kind of prioritization, need more information on each one of these goals. And I know that's a lot of work and I hate to ask for it, but need to know what the devil's in the details. I need to know this. We're not in a Peter Sellers movie. We can't bumble around and find the right solution. That joke is older than I am, and it's a reference to something
And
else.
I think the,
But I need more information to be able to, you're asking me to prioritize, I need more information. I think that's one.
Yeah, and I just want to say the goals, I mean, I know there's some comments made before, but if you look at column 1, that's really part of the basic education plan, right? I shouldn't say right, and we can definitely articulate that better. Columns number 2 and 3 are, they're both strategic and tactical because we feel we definitely need more community engagement.
Yep.
The hub, and we should be the hub of the community, and we need to create value within the community. So if you look, there's not a lot of things in there that are costly. They're more action steps that we can do. And then goal number 3 is recognizing that, we're probably not going to get any more money. The state formula's not, the formula's not going to change. So what actions can we take to look at revenue sources, or at least, change the course of, like, if you look at number 1, asset protection planning, we haven't done that. I mean, we haven't invested in our schools. The state's requiring now, going to be going up to 3% maintenance. So, we know we need to come up with a strategy, a plan in terms of how we're going to maintain what we have. And as if we're fortunate as we go forward in the future with some type of major construction, we need to make sure that that becomes a priority, that we don't repeat the past. So if you look at these were things that we're looking for sustainability. But we looked at column 1 again was the BEP. But we'll definitely articulate better. This was just, we had spent some time, a couple of meetings talking about this, going over. So this was just kind of bullets giving you ideas. And maybe it wasn't fair to ask about the goals. It was our way or my way of saying, hey, let's engage, because lessons learned from the past. We want to make sure that you don't have to ask questions of us, in March about what we present today. No, but I'm saying, you know what I mean? So, we're open to any feedback. So anything that we can do to facilitate the process, but also engage the community.
Anything but cool.
I think my follow-up to Mr. Pearson's comment is, as a school committee member, I can look at the goals in number 1, for example, and to continue the curriculum cycle work driven by data, for example. I really don't know what the ticket amount is. What's the amount of money that across the district we are planning on spending this year? So from our perspective, so even in my own household, if you want to use that as, I may want XYZ. I might even prioritize them XYZ, but X is so expensive that I might put Y in front of it or Z in front of it just because I can get that done. And so that's the piece, the associated costs with all of that, or if you can do half of it, or is it all or none? Or what is the plan? Are we, and I know that we do have curriculum that we're moving forward and it's going to cost X amount of money, and I get all that, but it really is a cost driver for sometimes selecting what, all of them are worthy, no doubt about it, but if we're going to have to cut, then what are we cutting? And and could we do half of it or whatever? And I know that's what you guys are going to come up with anyway, but obviously from our perspective, we don't work in schools, so it's real difficult for us to say, so what does that mean? Pre-curriculum assessment and alignment, how much is that going to cost? Even though that's a goal, because we're going to be asked to approve cuts, basically, in the end, unless some miracle happens. And I'm fully hopeful that the town council will give us as much as they possibly can. I really, truly believe we're going to work that out, and they're going to understand the road we're on, and that they're going to walk on that road with us. And I would love to be able to say, and I think Luke is right in the sense that if we have to say we're going to, go to 3.8 or 4% or whatever and do the cap, how many years do we have to do this where we're going to actually see the light? And will that work if we do this? can we guarantee that to the community that, okay, for the next 5 years, you're gonna be hit. It's not gonna be, no taxes. We're not gonna be, 2% or 2.5, which this community has seen over the years. And so I think that's my biggest, I don't know how to get to that. Even if someone comes in and tells us that's what we need to do, I think that plan, at least you can defend it. So, I don't really know what we need to do and how much money we're going to need to raise, basically. What I do know is that I don't see us decreasing our taxes in the near future because of the structural deficit that's only going to grow. And revenue is great, but you can't count on it. You cannot count on it. You get a grant in to do something. It's still not every year. And so all of that, unless you've got a maintenance of effort every year at X, then all the other revenue streams come and go, even solar, unless it's something that's going to definitely be every single year, we're going to get X from our Y off of our bill, which is very possible. So revenue's tough. Revenue's tough. But that's, I think.
Yeah, no, I have a format that I created. I think it achieves a little bit of your goals and I think it groups a little bit of what you've done into a little bit more of some of these things as action items of a larger goal. And that may help filter it out a little bit and we can, maybe add some financial data to that. I know where you're going with it, so.
Okay, are we done as a committee and we can bring it out to the public? Yeah? Okay, any comments? Sure.
Just to add to what you just said, new legislation came out, and this goes to what Mr. Pearson was saying about unfunded legislation, where curriculum has to come from a list that RIDE provides to communities of high-quality curriculum as rated through Ed Reports. And our district right now is going through a process, an adoption process, looking at English language arts curriculum and the process in which you go through in terms of adopting. And in the different areas you look at, the different publishers, there's the high end where one classroom setup could cost as much as $15,000. And when I say one classroom, I don't mean a grade, I mean one room. To the other end of the spectrum where it's almost free, but free is not really free because free means you're making photocopies and binders and PowerPoints and you're doing everything yourself, but you have the structure of the curriculum provided for you. But we don't want to make decisions just based on free, because if it doesn't match our priorities and our vision for instruction and our vision for professional development and how we want to move our district forward, getting free is not necessarily the right thing. So I think you make a really good point, because when we talk about curriculum development, some things we're able to do at a very low cost because we do embedded work in our district, and really the only big cost to the community is for us to provide subs so our teachers can meet and work on curriculum. And that's really very affordable because it could be a lot more. But it could go to the high end of adopting a curriculum piece to address maybe K-8 that could be very expensive. And then as a committee, you do have to give us some input on how we spend that money, because is it a K-8 adoption, or do we decide that's more than we can afford based on what we come up with as a recommendation? Maybe it's a K-5 adoption, maybe it's a 6-8 adoption, maybe it's a slow roll-up where it's 2 years at a time. Like, there's a lot of different options. So I think you make a really great point about attaching to those goal areas some dollars and cents so that you can see where priorities are and also see where things can fluctuate in one direction or another.
Thanks, Mr. Cowett. Any other comments? We're good?
I was just going to comment
Okay.
on Don's.
Yep.
The one thing that would be helpful in that is we don't do the day-to-day, right? So I can't tell you, where the happy medium is in that and setting that priority. But I think as we go through this process, having you guys kind of push back is helpful. So if we say, geez, we can, because a bargain isn't always a bargain, right? I always say there's a difference between cheap and value, right? So the value is in the middle usually, and then you have the expensive. Is where can we, use internal resources when possible, but sometimes we just don't have the internal resources to do it. So it's worth paying the $15,000 because there's no feasible way that we could actually implement. So that'll be part, I think, helpful as we go on. If we may set a priority initially, and you say that it's unattainable, then push back.
Yeah, 2 points to that. So the group that's working represents a number of teachers and administrators, and their charge is to come to you with really strong recommendations, because they would have been through a multi-day process where they look at all the bits and pieces and make a strong recommendation. And then we would have a dialogue based on what we recommend in terms of quality and what we think it would do for our community and our students, and then also the cost. And I think a good example of what you just said is what we did a few years ago with physical education. We didn't have a strong phys ed curriculum in place. We did the state report and we were very honest on the report, and we said, no, we don't have a strong phys ed curriculum in place. And we knew that doing it ourselves would not work in the time period that we had. So we actually contracted with some phys ed people to come in and facilitate a process that could have taken 2.5 years down to 1. And so that's a really great point, because sometimes doing it in-house can be affordable if you have the time and the plan. That's why the curriculum cycle is so important, because we can map it all out. But sometimes you are stuck and you have to make some moves and make some decisions, and sometimes paying a little bit out up front gives you long-term impact, because now that phys ed curriculum is in place and, and quality. It's a good quality piece. So, yeah, good points.
Thanks, Don. All right, anybody else? Okay, we can go forward, I guess, with agenda. Or did you have one more
Yeah,
thing?
so I think I started to say this before, but I had shared through email. I think you have them. I can give copy, but this is the presentation or the recommendation from Mrs. Bacon, and I have some to pass out. I won't take a long time with this. Here's a few, if you don't mind. No, it's one packet. You can just pass them down. Sorry. Right. So I don't want to, and I said I would bring it to the committee. We've talked about this. Just quickly, the 3-year budget project, did I pass enough down? Okay. The 3-year budget projection, if you look at number C there, letter C. God bless you. So it talks about, what the town will do, what the school department will do, but C is important. It says the state shall cooperate by the preparation and provision of information necessary to develop these 3-year forecasts pursuant to Rhode Island General Laws 16-2-21.2. My whole point is that all of our time, your time is valuable. And I don't mind doing these exercises, and that's where we talk about projections. But as long as there's that big disclaimer there saying, we don't know from year to year what we're going to get from state revenue. We don't know what legislative mandates are going to be put in front of us that's going to impact the budget, because those things, as Mr. Pearson said, happen. So I think that's as long as we're on the same page when we put forward these 3-year projections, right? So because the C part is makes it very, very challenging. And then Ms. Bacon, there's a presentation there that she had requested, and we've talked about, we don't have a problem putting something like this together, but there's going to be a lot of spots where we're not going to. 2013 was different than 2019. That's all. And I appreciate the fact that she, made the recommendation and put something forward, but I didn't feel it was, I wanted just to share with the committee to have the conversation. So we, unless there's any, we'll try to do the best that we can. I can't speak for the town. I know at the last town council meeting I was there, Mr. Arnett was trying to explain, and I want to paraphrase, but why it's going to be challenging to have a detailed budget December 9th. But we get it, That's why we're having this conversation, because there's a lot of feedback that you've shared tonight that'll help us move forward with the process. And we definitely want to give people what they're looking for. It's so anyways, I just want to bring that to your attention. We'll try to do the best that we can. We need to have conversations with the municipal, our counterparts. Yes. Soundside. No, just because we want to be on the same page, and that's all. And like I said, I can speak to you, you can speak to me, but I really can't speak to the council. And so I don't know if anybody has any input on this. And again, I don't want to belabor, but I did promise I would bring it forward, and I don't want to.
So,
Yes.
Sarah, how, because I did look through this before, but I didn't see, I mean, all that much difference between what you gave to us
That's
and
I
what she's
really don't
asking
have an
for,
issue
so I
at
don't
all.
see an issue.
It's the
Right.
detail. Some of it will be the detail.
Yeah,
That's
I
all.
mean, I think, but that letter C only says that the state shall cooperate. They have cooperated, right? They've.
I was talking about the presentation.
Oh, yeah, well, I mean,
The detail's gonna be in
Cut and paste it.
preliminary draft form.
Right, that's all.
As it always is, and I'll make sure that I say that what we present on December 9th is probably going to be very different than what we
yeah,
ultimately.
I
end
mean,
up presenting.
we know the salary increases, we know all the different contractual obligations we can put out there,
Right,
right?
right.
And I think that was the only other thing I saw was, there was a comparison, I think, to the previous year, which we don't have. We're looking at, do we have any like updated numbers that we include
So
up to
I'll run
date? or-
unaudited, because by December 9th, we still have
Yeah.
audited, but so I always, even in the, I'm not on, I don't know what
Oh,
I'm
all
doing.
right.
In the budget detail, you always have the previous year's unaudited expenditures when we have that, then the budget, and then what I'm projecting for that. So that'll be there. I'll get the principal's budgets December 6th. So they're not getting them really in advance because the timeline is what it is. But it's draft, and they will have details, and it will be something that we will continue to go through. And, you know, we will just have a lot of more discussions going forward on what that detail will finally look like when we're done with the budget.
So it's doable, but it'll be preliminary.
Right.
Okay.
All right, are we ready to move on? Okay. Number 7, the discussion of student-operated motor vehicles on school property policy, EEAAA, which is our second reading. Was in our packet as a reference 3. We've all seen it before. I know the edits were done. Are we ready to dispense with the second reading at least? Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we dispense with the second reading
Mhm.
of, let's go over here, of, motion 1, okay.
No.
No.
Number 7.
You're on- I don't think
Yeah,
you're on
here
the
we
right
go.
thing. You're not on the right thing there, Dave.
I'm not on the
Yeah.
right thing.
Yeah.
Okay, Madam Chair, I make a motion that to dispense with the second reading of the student-operated motor vehicle school property, EEAAA, as presented / amended.
I second the motion.
What's my,
You lost your agenda.
Yeah.
Long agenda.
okay, here we go.
Here's the long agenda. You got it? He's
Yeah, I
got it.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 5-0. And then moving on to the actual approval, is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the student-operated motor vehicles on school property policy, EEAAA, as presented / amended.
I second the motion.
Are there any questions or concerns from the committee? We're all set. How about the public? Looks good. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 5-0. And I just want to thank our school committee clerk, because she is so good at making all of our motions so that we don't lose track of what we're doing. Thank you. Our hat is off to you. Moving on to 8, discussion of search of students, student property, JIH, our second reading. It was our reference number 4. We've already seen this.
There was a change,
oh.
just an addition that was made.
Oh, okay.
If you look at, I left in bold F,
I saw that in
the
bold,
last
yeah.
sentence, because it was talked about, discussed, and we felt that it was appropriate. So, and I did speak to the, I think it's Captain Witt, who oversees the SROs, if that would be appropriate, and he said yes.
All right. Anything else?
That was the only change.
All right, are we ready to move on the second reading?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to dispense the second reading of search of students, property policy, JIH, as presented / amended.
Second the motion.
Any questions from the committee? Anything from the public? All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 5-0. And are we ready to approve the policy as presented and amended?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the search of students, student property policy, JIH, as presented / amended.
I second the motion.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, anything from the public? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to number 9, which was the discussion and approval of the Director of Human Resources contract, which is on number 5. And Mr. Levis, did you want to speak to this?
Sure, just briefly that I'm recommending, I've attached a new job description, the increase in salary, and also a contract on Miss Andy Rios. She's currently the human resource manager, and we've looked at what she, in the past, we've had a director of human resources and a human resource manager. When our previous in-house attorney / compliance officer left, Ms. Rios took on a lot of those responsibilities, has taken on the full responsibility of a director of human resources. And we saw, with our technology issues this summer, and going into a new payroll system that, we hope we'll be able to present to you within the next, month or so. There's so much more that's been put on our plate, and you'll see in the job description. So I ask that we elevate her position to the title she should have as Director of Human Resources.
Ready? Are there any questions from the committee for the superintendent? Are we ready to move?
Yes.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the Director of Human Resource contract for Andrea Riolis, effective November 21st, 2019.
I second the motion.
Any further questions from the committee? Anything from the public? All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 5-0. And finally, moving on to citizens' comments. Are there any comments from the citizens gathered? I see none. So I will entertain a motion for scheduling our next meeting.
Madam Chair, I make a motion that the next meeting of the school committee be scheduled for Thursday, December 12th, 2019, at 7 p.m. at Coventry Town Hall.
It's supposed to be December 5th, right?
Okay. Okay.
Whoops.
I'll make an amendment. I make an amendment, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I make a motion that the next meeting of the school committee be scheduled for Thursday, December 5th at 7 p.m. at Coventry Town Hall.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 5-0. And finally, I think, let's see what I have for time. It looks like 8:53. Are we ready to adjourn?
Madam Chair, I make a motion that the meeting be adjourned at 8:53 p.m.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you all for attending.
You're welcome.